Hello everyone, this is Tom Uren. I'm here with the Grugq for another Between Two Nerds discussion. G'day Grugq, how are you?
G'day Tom, fine, and yourself?
I'm well. This week's episode is brought to you by Sublime Security. Sublime makes an adaptive email platform and you can find them at sublime.security. So we've been talking about O-Day. And one of the phrases that people use is the fetishization of O-Day, which basically means that it gets a lot more attention than it needs to do. And
it's outsized, yeah.
Yeah.
Just briefly, an O-Day is when there's a vulnerability that's known to people other than the vendor, and as a result, there's no patch or mitigation or workaround to fix this vulnerability, and it can be used by these other person or other people to exploit that software and gain access, or crash the system or do whatever.
I think part of the reason they get a lot of attention is because when they become known to the vendor, often there's a push to get a lot of publicity so that people do patch. So if it's a particularly bad vulnerability, and bad would be like remotely executable.
Log4j was a huge one, right?
Yeah. Everyone talks about it because they want people to know about it in order to patch it. And so that's not something that happens with vulnerabilities that may be very bad but have been around for a long time. Like you don't mention them anymore because if you're going to patch them, you did it 5 years ago. So
this has been on my mind because I took part in this offensive cyber workshop, Chatham House rules, so don't ask me specifics. But we were sort of we came up with some concepts and things to discuss, and what I found surprising was just how big O-Day was within the minds of there were academics and practitioners and all that, and the practitioners that I saw did not list O-Day as an interesting thing, but everyone else did,
right?
And so we would have things, like non-state actors doing operations and cyber operations. What is cyber? What is operation? And then it would be O-Day.
Right. So I think it's interesting that you said that the practitioners did not rate it as a particular topic of interest. And so it holds a fascination for people who are thinking about these problems but haven't done those jobs.
Yeah.
And so I can understand why it is fascinating, because it seems to me like a good, I guess it's an exploit, right? Is operating at the limits of human endeavor, like at the limits of human ingenuity. There was an NSO group one a while ago,
right,
where I can't remember the exact details, but they were constructing basically a computer inside inside the exploit, so that they could work the problem after they'd sort of got a very small foothold, work the problem so that they could get to the next stage, and that kind of stuff is fascinating.
It's amazing. It's like that. This is it is wow. These people, they had nothing and they turned it into something by
they had 2 bytes.
They had 2 toothpicks and they managed to construct a ship somehow. I don't know, and that's amazing. But I think at the same time, O-Day within the context of operational cyber, if you're a state cyber agency and you're doing your day-to-day operations, you're show up at 9, work until 4:30, leave early.
That's right. Yeah.
When you're doing that, then O-Day is not your go-to for every problem.
No, it just can't be, can it? Because a few episodes ago, we were talking about the size of some of these organizations. And if I remember rightly, it was NSA was 30,000 people. And
Yeah.
if you've got that many people working on these sorts of problems, there's got to be an everyday, reliable, bread and butter
Like
thing.
you can't use a super secret thing for absolutely everything, especially not if it's like you gain a little bit of access and you use that to create a virtual machine that interprets bytecode that you then send the bytecode to, that then creates another exploit that then does this, that then creates a second exploit inside. Like, that's amazing, but it's super fragile. Like, just like that works most of the time. But when you're looking at the scale of that these organizations operate, most of the time isn't good enough.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also the chances of discovery go up the more you use it, right? And when it's like, it is kind of the magic, like, we we like the magic, we like seeing it, but also the more you use it, the more likely it is to be discovered and patched, and then you lose it, right? Yeah. So it's a special occasion kind of a thing.
I mean, it is very much like magic in that it would be a magic trick, right? And if you're at a party and you show everyone like, oh, here's a card trick, but then you do it to literally everyone that you meet the entire night, like, people will get bored of it and figure out what you're doing, because you can't play the trick that many times with that many different people around. Like, it's not going to work forever.
I mean, I think the difference between magic tricks and a party is that if you're doing this in the real world, there's very well-resourced organizations that are trying to discover and unpick your magic trick. It's not like you've got a bunch of rubes at the average party.
Yeah, well, there you go. It's a magic trick where mixed in among the crowd are other magicians trying to steal your stuff.
Yeah.
And you need to, so when you do use it, you want to be sort of cautious and limited. And it's sort of like Ode is a sometimes food. It's not the leafy greens. It's not the sort of like this base layer of like, here's your grains. You need to have 5 servings of Ode a day. Like, it's not that. That's yeah. Like, that's password reuse and token theft. That's your, that's how you're doing most of your stuff.
That's the base of the access pyramid.
Exactly, the access. There you go. All right, so you've got your password reuse, then you've got like your misconfigurations, then you've got like your public exploits, and then somewhere at the very tippy top, you've got your Ode, which is you bring it out for birthdays or your dirt day treat of the week sort of thing. It's not a it's not a food.
So I'll approach this from a different angle and say that Ode is worth all the focus, because it's what gets people the very super top priority access, right? So even though it's a small proportion of what goes on, because almost by the nature of what it is, you save it for the most important targets that you can't get to any other way, and so therefore it has an outsized impact. And so,
why all this focus on generals when there's so many privates? We should be looking at the lance corporals and the enlisted men who make up the bulk of the army, not the guy making the decisions, which is just that, there's a very few of them. So I don't know why they're the focus of these histories about these battles, because the majority of the work being done is done not by them. If you, look at it from a quantity point of view. Yeah. I think that's the... That's the counter argument, is still I think that they get used less than people think. Even for those like special occasions. Like, I think,
well, I mean, it depends what you're talking about. Like, if you're talking about what's most important from a public policy point of view,
right?
I kind of think that the people who are likely to be targeted by those best of the best Odes are
Greek journalists.
Well, I guess the problem is that there is this huge diversity, right? It is on at one extreme, individuals who are doing things that powerful people don't like, and at the other extreme, it's the president of the US who, at least in theory, has an entire apparatus that's designed to make sure that they're not using vulnerable smartphones. Like I said, in theory.
In theory. This is true up until, say, 2025 or so. Like, yeah.
Well,
with few exceptions.
I mean, there were stories from the first Trump presidency where he was...
Yeah. No, so I guess one of the things that sort of comes up is that when people think of O-Day, they are either like infosec technical people who want to be like, well, if they hacked a TV by finding a specific vulnerability for that particular brand of smart TV in that hotel room, so that they could access the remote that had a speaker, that had a microphone in it, so that they could listen to what's going on. Like that's an O-Day. Like that, it's an unpatched vulnerability. But it's not like, unless you happen to be someone with that smart TV that that a state wants to surveil.
Right, yeah. The planets have to align.
Yeah, like you don't need to worry about it. So you can sort of argue that that's O-Day. But then at the other end, it's like, an iPhone gets hacked by O-Day. And that feels like that's a lot of people who are vulnerable in theory. So I think that there's the sense that like when these organizations have O-Day and they're using O-Day, it's all about iPhones and Windows and Mac OS. It's all about the things that I use and I'm exposed because these people have developed weapons that they're keeping private rather than fixing it. And so there's, like, I think people have this sort of misplaced sense of vulnerability that comes from believing that that's what's happening all the time. That there's this
there
like
was that Kaspersky
set of
report on, I think they called it triangulation.
Yeah.
And it was a series, I think, of iOS exploits.
There was
and it was very, very clever. And I was surprised at how widely it had been deployed against Russian targets, in that it seemed like it was thousands of them.
I think we spoke about it at the time as like it's they felt like something that was about to be lost, so you may as well just like spank it.
Yeah.
Or
yeah. And like thousands sounds like a lot, but when you consider that there's 1 billion iPhones or iOS devices,
right,
and maybe it was 1,000 in Russia, I don't know, 10,000 in the whole world or something like that. That's still an infinitesimally small number of people compared to the world.
Right. And I think the other thing is we could take the Eternal Blue exploit for an example again, where it was found, used for years. It got patched because when they found out it had been exposed, they worked with Microsoft to get it fixed. But it was only after the exploit became available that it was abused by every threat actor out there.
Right.
Beforehand, like as an O-Day, it was magic, and it was also not abused against regular schlubs like the rest of us. There's not a
well, I guess I would say its use was prioritized. Like abuse, I think it depends whether you're a target or not, right?
Well, I would say it's abuse when it's used for, and this is again subjective. Like I'd say it's abuse when it's used for criminal reasons.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if that's
probably something we can all agree on.
Yeah, but then people are going to be like, well, the NSA does crime. They're a criminal organization, right? Which is, like ignoring that insanity for a minute. I think we can agree that, like, yeah, if there's someone who has a checklist that they have to go through before they can use an exploit, and they have to get legal sign off, it's probably not being abused, right? Like if there's lawyers involved in the decision chain, it's unlikely that it's being abused.
Yeah,
right?
Mostly, I think the incentives, if you've got a piece of magic, you want to hold on to it, and one of the ways you hold on to it is by using it carefully. And so I think that's a universal dynamic for any like half sophisticated cyber actor. They're going to think about
Right.
like managing that risk.
Well, I'd argue that for a while China was not in that group.
Right, yeah, and I guess that's why I put the caveat of half sophisticated.
Right. Right. But it created this interesting dynamic. So for a while, because China was perfectly happy using public exploits, right? Like they didn't really care what got them in; they just wanted to get in. Whereas that's not true for the Five Eyes, who are very careful about using things that can't be traced to them, or things that won't be detected easily, right? And so for the Chinese, it was actually smart for them to publish as many exploits and bugs as they could find, because they were denying them to the Five Eyes and making them available and creating cover traffic for their own use. So from their perspective, reporting bugs was actually increasing their arsenal while potentially decreasing the capabilities of their adversaries.
Right, yeah. I think that makes sense if you think of it from the point of view of who's in front. And like if you're behind, it kind of makes sense that you want to just patch everything that you can. And that's your first priority, to mitigate your own weakness. And then if you can still, get some mileage out of it afterwards, well, happy days. I think if you feel like you're ahead, you probably want to keep everything secret and try and hold.
Right. You want to preserve your advantage.
Preserve your lead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I think it does.
I think so.
I don't know that the Chinese state as a whole has a really sophisticated view of whether it's ahead or behind. It's just got a lot of pieces, like moving pieces that are working.
It's much more federal than people give it credit for. I think that there's this very strong leadership, but then the implementation is sort of parceled out to individual states or what do they call them? I guess it's states.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think there wouldn't be a single decision maker who could weigh up the different equities across the whole cybersecurity, and especially like since they contract a lot of cyber espionage, so and who would own that decision and make it?
And they have freelancers who will compromise things first and then try and sell it later as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing about this workshop that, again, it's just, I found it surprising how excited everyone was to talk about ODay and capabilities. And there were sort of a very minority group of people who, when you talk about capabilities, for us, we were thinking about things like weapon contrivance, which is sort of once you have access to something, or when you're going to get access to something, you need to develop the tool that's going to have the effect that you want. Right. Like that's the interesting thing. It's not that like how do we get into there, because that's a implementation detail that we'll figure out. But once we're there, with Stuxnet, for example, like the interesting thing is not how do we gain access, because we can figure that out by whatever means. But once we have access, there's only a limited number of things that we can do given the environment that we're operating in. So how do we exploit that?
Okay,
that becomes interesting, not the actual vulnerability that gets exploited. Like that's the key. It's what you do once you're inside that's interesting.
Right. Okay.
I think.
So I mean, Stuxnet seems like maybe not the best example, because I thought the way they got in was interesting in that I think it was a human source, right, who was...
Right, so I don't find that interesting because I think that that's obvious. Right, to me, that's just like, that's when you have a difficult problem, here's one of the solution sets that you can pick from. And it's interesting because it's not a cyber thing, but it's not interesting. I mean...
I guess what you're saying is that there's multiple ways a human could get software onto a system.
Right.
But getting a person to do something for you, that's a solved problem.
Right,
Whereas
exactly.
you're saying that there's one way to get Stuxnet to have the effect that you want, and it's a very narrow path, and you want to make damn sure that it works once you sort of attach it to the human, and therefore you need it to work perfectly.
Yeah. So, like, I think that that's the more interesting thing. It's the, like, hypothetically, we have access to this thing. What is a thing that we could do that would achieve our goal? All right. How do we make that happen? Like, that strikes me as more interesting than how do we get software installed onto the secret network? Because it feels to me like you can figure that out. Like, that's not insurmountable.
Right.
Just to, like, as an example, here's the thing that many years ago, someone was telling me about how this particular enterprise got hit by, this was pre-ransomware. That's how long ago it was, but they got hit by banking Trojans. And the way that it was installed was there was a Word document with this macro infection thing. And the Word document said, enable macros for a chance to win a $20 gift certificate. Right. And so this one guy at the office had taken this Word document and had run it on all of the PCs he could find. Like, he wanted to maximize his chances of getting that $20 gift certificate. So he was just taking it around after hours, like, click, run, next one, click, run.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a solved issue. Like, that's done.
Right, yeah. I mean, going back to our food pyramid, I guess what you're saying is that there's this smorgasbord of options to get access, and that if an organization is large enough, you will get access somehow. And there's very, very few organizations where it's impossible to get access. And those maybe are the ones that sit at the top of the access pyramid, or where the solution sits at the top of the access pyramid. Maybe if they're not like just totally firewalled or not even on the internet. And so that's the and so then when you say, well, access is fundamentally like, that's a problem that you have to deal with because it's inevitable. It's like, what do you do next is the thing that you've got to tackle. And so therefore 0 day doesn't really make sense to talk about, because it makes sense to talk about if you're that organization that will be vulnerable.
If you're
or like you say, a Greek journalist, and therefore but the question is really not how do I protect myself from 0 day, but what do I do next? And so for a Greek journalist, it might be like lockdown mode or whatever you can do on an Android.
Not keeping things on your phone so that even if you are compromised, there's no access. It's like there's ways of doing impact containment such that O-Day is not a problem, or it's not as big of a problem because your exposure just isn't there. So like O-Day has this like sort of outsized importance in the minds of people who are not experienced in cyber operations. But I guess we sort of need to be careful to not downplay it too much either, because it is important, right? It's important because you use it for the things that are most important, as opposed to the majority of stuff. Like the majority of your operations, you're reusing passwords, you're using misconfigurations, and so on. You're not using the crown jewels on everything. And I think people get super excited because they believe that the crown jewels impact them in some way.
Well, maybe it's their crown jewels, right? So everyone, we don't all have the same crown jewels. Like countries have different crown jewels, for example. It's like literally.
I think for people outside, they can understand that vulnerabilities in software is bad and they should be patched, and that ODay are about vulnerabilities, and so not patching them is bad. Yeah, it's a sort of transitive property of like, we know that vulnerabilities are bad. ODay are unpatched vulnerabilities. ODay are bad. Like, therefore, any ODay that exists means that the vulnerabilities are out there everywhere, and we're all more at risk for them.
Well,
and I think
like it's a bit like supply chain attacks, where it's clear once you know that there's a vulnerability, like there's an answer, which is patch or mitigate it somehow. Once you know it's there, you can do something about it. But both with supply chain and ODays, there's at least this feeling of there's an unmitigated vulnerability that we don't know about or could appear out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And so I think they both get attention because it feels like an unresolved problem, an insoluble problem to some degree. So, I mean, I don't think that's quite as strong with supply chain because there are a lot of things you can do. But to me, it's the same dynamic at play or the same logic.
Yeah.
They get a lot of attention because they feel like they're either insoluble or not yet solved.
So I think that's part of it, is that there's this, the sense of vulnerability, this, unsolved problem that's just out there menacing us. But I think part of it is also that it's sort of like sexy and mysterious, right? It's unknown. And it's because it's unknown, it's attractive and like it's cool, right? And I think that like, makes it.
It's like Rumsfeld Unknown Unknowns, except it's a dangerous unknown.
Yeah, right. It's like so.
It's a known unknown. You know that they're out there.
It's a known unknown, right? But to quote myself, it's the like worrying about ODays is like worrying about ninjas instead of cardiovascular disease, right? Like it's really sexy to be like, ninjas could be out there after me. You don't know. Like I don't know. It could be.
It sounds like a lot better film being chased by ninjas rather than.
Yeah, it's safety and security through doing the boring basics versus, train hard and get revenge. I guess
it's the Karate Kid, not the patching kid.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Thanks, Grugq.